Yo, I ain't gonna lie. I spent years telling myself that I was working hard. But when I finally looked at the numbers, I realized that I wasn't nearly as disciplined as I thought I was. And the number that exposed me wasn't my weight, right? Was my calories. And it wasn't the number of workouts I did. It was actually something much simpler, okay? How often did I actually do what I said I was going to do? You know what I mean? Because once I started looking at life through that lens, a lot of things finally started to make sense, right? So for years, I thought my problem was motivation. Then I thought it was discipline. Then I thought I just needed the right diet, right? The right workouts, the right morning routine, right? But eventually I realized that my results were just the reflection of my execution rate. If I said I was going to do the things, if I said I was going to do 10 things and I consistently did 4 of them, why was I surprised that I wasn't the guy, I needed to be? Why was I surprised that I wasn't getting the life of the guy that does 9 of the 10 things he said he was going to do? And that's the part I wasn't measuring, right? And I have a pretty obvious example of this in my own life, right? I went from 270 pounds to 168 pounds. And when people see that transformation, it's pretty easy to assume that, oh, you found the right diet or you found the right workout, right? Or there's some secret information that you got, right? I did. I knew a lot of what I needed to do when I was still 270 pounds, right? I knew the protein mattered. I knew the calories mattered, right? I knew I needed to train. I knew I needed to move. I was a smart, lazy person, right? I knew I needed to train, I knew I needed to sleep better. The knowledge was definitely there. The knowledge is there with y'all. What wasn't there was the consistent execution. And that distinction definitely mattered because if knowledge was the real problem, I should have changed years earlier. Honestly, I shouldn't have got to where I got, And this is what I used to do, right? I have one productive day. I wake up early, I train, right? I eat perfect. I get my work done. I maybe clean my apartment. I maybe go for a walk. And at the end of the day, I say oh, see, I'm locked in now. I adjust myself based on my best days. But then Tuesday would come and I'm sleeping in. And I'll push the workout back. I eat something I had it planned to. Then I tell myself, the work is going to get done later. Then I scroll for an hour. And suddenly half the promises I made to myself, by that morning, were gone, bro. Then I have another good day and convince myself that, I got to get disciplined again. I got to lock in. And that's a terrible way to measure yourself, honestly, brother, because I was measuring intensity, not reliability. So here's a shift I made. I know a lot of y'all are numbers guys, and I'm a numbers guy too. So let's imagine we actually put some numbers to it. Let's say you decide there are 5 things that you need to do every day, right? Train, hit your nutrition, walk, do your important work, right? And then complete your nighttime routine. That's 35 promises across 7 days, okay? Now imagine you kept only 18 of them guys. That's only half, right? And here's the interesting part. You might feel like you're working really hard because some of those 18 days are actually difficult. It's actually hard work, right? Some workouts were brutal. Some work days were super long. Maybe you had one perfect day where you crushed everything. Emotionally, you feel like you're putting in a massive effort, but the scoreboard tells a different story, right? Your intensity might be high, but your execution rate is low. And I think that's where a lot of ambitious men get confused, right? I started thinking about discipline like this, right? Promises kept plus promises made equals your execution rate. Not because life needs to be some robotic spreadsheet, but because this exposes something that feelings don't expose. Get out your feelings, my boy, right? You can feel committed and still be extremely inconsistent, and you can feel exhausted and still be avoiding the most important work that you have to do. And you can feel like you're doing everything until you actually look at what you said versus what's being done. And that gap is a lot of the times it's revealing, okay? Because most, the average, the 99%, the part that you don't want to be, they measure the outcome the weight, the money, the followers, the body fat, the revenue, whatever, right? But those are lagging indicators because they show up later. The actual interesting metric is actually upstream, right? what behaviors are producing those results? You know, if the scale isn't moving, your immediate reaction is, oh, maybe my diet isn't working. But before changing the diet, look upstream, brother. How consistent was the diet that you followed? If your business isn't growing, sometimes like your immediate reaction is, oh, maybe I need a new strategy. And this is something I'm dealing with. But before buying another strategy, buying another coach, look upstream, right? How consistent was the strategy that you followed, right? If someone says, I can't become disciplined, I think the first question should really be, what percentage of your promises are you actually keeping? Because that tells a much useful story, my boy. That's really the whole story. I ain't gonna lie, right? And this was humbling for me because I love to think of myself like as ambitious. I had big goals. I had big plans. I had big ideas. And I knew the kind of man that I wanted to become. But my ambition is incredibly easy to fake. And you can sit there for 3 hours thinking about the life that you're going to build. You can meditate and technically accomplish nothing, my boy, right? You can watch the business videos. You can feel entrepreneurial, and you can watch the fitness content, and you can feel health conscious, and you can read the books and be disciplined and like feel disciplined, right? And you can plan your entire week and feel organized, but none of those feelings guarantee execution. And that's the uncomfortable part, my boy, because potential, it doesn't have a conversion rate unless it becomes a behavior, brother. Your potential has to be realized. All right, boom, this is the next day because the audio cut out. So they had to remake the next half of the video. But to piggyback on what I was saying, when I look back at the periods where my life actually changed, they weren't necessarily the periods where I felt the most motivated. They were the periods where behavior became boring. You know what I mean? Where I was doing the boring things every day. You know, when I knew what I was eating, I knew when I was training, and I knew what needed to happen. And then I really just repeated it, you know, again and again, again, again. And there's really less drama with that, you know, less restarting. Less like thinking like, oh, Monday is going to be different, you know, less like, oh, I'm going to change up everything, you know, but it also came with less excitement. But with less excitement, there came more execution. And the results really start showing up for me, and you can see it. Like, you go back to my old YouTube videos. This shit crazy, boy. So that's what I really had to do, was really chase the boredom, you know what I mean? And that's why I don't think that discipline is best measured by how hard someone can go for one day. Like, you can go hard and post it, you know what I mean? I think the better question is, how predictable are you, bro? You know what I mean? If you say you're going to train tomorrow, how predictable are you that you're going to train and actually do it? If you say you're going to wake up at a certain time, like, are you up at that time, bro? How predictable is that? Like, how predictable is it that you're actually up? You know, if you schedule that hour of deep work, and this is something I'm working on right now. If you schedule that hour of deep work, can you actually trust that hour is going to happen? You know, if you say you're going to clean up the spot, is the spot actually clean, or you still got, you know, piss stains in the toilet, boy? So does it actually get clean? Are you predictable enough to trust your own word? And that's real discipline. You know what I mean? Not the plan, not the hype, but your predictability. You know what I mean? That's one thing I pride my bro on. Like, my bro is super predictable. If I call him at a certain time, like, let's say it's in the morning, man, I guarantee you, buddy is like, get his steps in, right, at the gym. You know what I mean? That's why I rock with, bro. Same thing with when you call me, you know what I'm on. And this connects directly to something I've been really thinking a lot about lately. It's really like self-trust. You know, if I constantly say, oh, I'm going to do this, and then I don't, that's actually collecting evidence. You know what I mean? On the bad end. That's stacking the rocks against me. You know what I mean? But if I say, well, I'm going to do this today, and I actually do it, that's also collecting evidence on the good end. And eventually those repetitions, they become a part of your identity. And that's what we're here for. I mean, that's why I'm getting lean in the first place, just to change my identity. And that's why this metric goes much deeper than any productivity. You're not just counting the tasks, you're actually measuring the relationship you have to your word. You know what I mean? And I think that's where a lot of you guys, and me included, to make that mistake. You know what I mean? Your results are improving, so you change the plan. You do a new diet, new workout, new calendar, new productivity. You add a tab to Notion. You know, you looking on YouTube for other guys. Like, come on, bro. New course, new challenge, new strat. Come on, bro. But if your execution stays the same throughout all those, the outcome usually doesn't change either. And that's why you still stuck in the same place, my boy. You know what I mean? Because if you're a guy that's like executing at 40% and you give that guy the greatest plan in the world and he's only executing on the greatest plan at 40%, you know what I'm saying? It's a dub. But you give a dummy like me a plan, I'm going to execute it consistently. You could be a horrible plan. I'm going to beat out the water the guy that's doing the 40%. You know what I mean? And that's why I became less obsessed with like finding the perfect thing to do. Really more obsessed with being the guy that actually follows one plan. So that goes like, I got my coach now. My coach, I'm on a workout, right? I said at the beginning of the year, I'm going to keep a workout for 1 year. I've been doing it for 1 year. Could have hopped to my coach's plan. I'm like, nah, coach, I got to see it through. I got to see this workout for at least 1 year. So I can at least say once in my life, like, oh, I followed a workout plan for 1 year. Have you, my boy? Have you followed a workout plan for 1 year, my boy? Come on. So I sat back and I like broke this down into 3 levels. Started thinking about it in like 3 different layers, right? So level 1, you have the outcome. Okay. This is what everybody sees. So they see the weight, they see the physique, the money on your business, shorty, your apartment, the whip, right? Whatever the result is. And then you have layer 2, okay? This is the behavior. And this is what actually creates the outcome. Like, oh, did I train? Did I eat according to plan? Did I work? Did I walk? Did I do my steps? Did I sleep? You know what I'm saying? Did I complete the thing? That's layer 2. Okay? And then you have layer 3. This is the most important part. This is the deepest level. And the one that like, a lot of people don't tackle. See it like a little bit more on YouTube, but not a lot of people tackle this level. And this is the deepest level. Am I becoming someone whose behavior is predictable? Like I talked about, right? So am I someone who keeps like their word? Someone who doesn't constantly restart, you know, someone that like actually trusts himself. And most people are at level 1, right? And completely ignore level 2 and especially level 3, my boy. And then they wonder like, oh, why is level 1 not changing? Why is the outcome not changing? Right? And here's another reason why I like looking at like that level 2, like the execution, like kind of level 3, because the outcomes can fluctuate. This is something that I dealt with, especially like at 219, like 199, like my weight would go up like 4 or 5 pounds in a day, even though I've been freaking locked in. You know what I mean? So it could especially happen. That stuff gets scary, you know, and the outcomes fluctuate, especially in fitness outcomes. You can do everything right for a really short period of time and the skill might not move immediately. Then you get like emotional, you know, when you don't get that reward you want. And this is where a lot of people panic and honestly give up. You know, you assume that it isn't working and then you get that monkey brain like, oh, I'm just going to switch it up. That's crazy. You can't think like that. You want to change everything. But if the behaviors are being executed consistently, that tells you a different story. It tells you keep going. Just keep going, bro. See it through. You know what I mean? You can occasionally have a good outcome despite terrible behavior. You know, a lower weigh-in, you know, a luckier business month. And you can convince yourself that everything is fine. But that's why one result isn't always enough information, because the behavior underneath it tells a better story. You know, when I look at the difference between the version of me at 270, my boy, and the version of me who got down 168, you know what I'm saying? Obviously the body changed for sure. But the more meaningful thing was my identity change. Underneath that, I became more predictable, you know, not perfect yet, but I am predictable, you know, start doing more of what I said that I would do. That's fire. That's fire to me, boy. I ain't gonna lie. And as that changed, everything else started moving with it, you know, my body was just the visible scoreboard, you did. And this is what I'm interested in now. You know, can I take those same principles that help me transform, the outside, the body, really apply it to the rest of my life, especially when I'm building Out Here Elite. You know what I mean? Work, money, shorties, relationships, my environment, my family, my standards. Because the temptation is to always think, and I know y'all think this, like, well, fitness is one thing, like, oh, business is different. I'm starting to have a different viewpoint, but like the tactics are different, but the underlying question might be exactly the same. Like, can I execute consistently enough to, for the results to really have a chance to compound? And that's why I love this journey. I think you should start with it first, especially if you're not there yet. You're looking to change your identity and ultimately change your life. You should start with fitness because you can take those same principles exactly to business. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm documenting right now. So if someone feels like they're wasting their potential before deciding they need more motivation, before, buying another program, before redesigning their entire life, I'd look at 1 week, okay? Write down the most important things that you're supposed to do, that are supposed to happen. Not 25 tiny habits, the things that actually matter, the needle movers, right? Then look at what actually happened, So, no emotion, no excuses, don't self-sabotage. Just look at the data. Like, did I say I was going to do what I did? You know what I mean? Did I actually do it? What's the gap? Why didn't it happen? Because that gap really tells the whole story. And it's not about becoming obsessive. Like, multiple times where I was obsessive about the date. I got a whole Notion, like, tracker that shows everything, right? It's not about that. It's not like, oh, I missed one thing, therefore, hey, I'm a failure. Hell no. That's exactly the identity trap I've been trying to move away from. Messing up once and kind of self-sabotage the fuck, right? Just look at the data. It's like, this is the opposite. Look at the data. The data removes the drama. So instead of like, oh, I'm lazy, like possessing that quality. No, you can just say, oh, I planned 5 important actions and I completed 3. That's useful, right? Instead of, oh, I don't have discipline. It's, I miss my nighttime routine. Okay. Now there's something simple and specific I can solve. That's what they do in business too. If you didn't know, they just A/B test things and play it like a video game. Oh, this week it was 35% close rate. Let's see if we can get it to 35.5%. Now there's something specific to solve. So instead of turning your behavior into your identity, like, I'm just using behavior to diagnose the system, and that really changes everything. But the real issue, the real problem that, oh, I'm undisciplined is it's really almost impossible to fix. It's way too vague, right? But like, if you flip it and you're like, oh, I keep skipping the workout I schedule for 7 p.m. because I'm exhausted by it. You really drop it down to the data, that's solvable, right? Oh, I keep ordering food because I have nothing prepared. That's solvable, I lose 2 hours every morning. That's solvable. Oh, I write 10 things on my list and I finish 3. That's solvable, man. The metric isn't here to shame. It's just something to look at, man. It's there to expose what's actually leaking. So that's probably one of the biggest lessons, on this journey. So it taught me the truth usually is less dramatic than the story that's in your head, right? I don't have to become a superhuman and a machine overnight. You just need to close that gap between, what you said and what you do. And then close it just a little bit more and then a little bit more. Just keep closing that gap though until, your behavior starts matching the identity that you said that you wanted. That's all I had to do. So to keep closing that gap, to actually turn it to that motherfucker. You did. So I think there's 2 versions of ambition. Okay. There's a man who's addicted to potential, right? Your whole life, people have been telling you, oh, you have potential, You love to imagine what you said you could become. You talk about the business, the physique, the money, the lifestyle, the shorties, we always talk about the start, always talking about locking in, always one Monday away. You love that dopamine hit that you get from thinking about it, bro. And then there's a man who actually becomes predictable, don't gotta announce everything. You just lock in. Your calendar's packed. It tells a different story. Your body tells a different story. Your environment tells a story. Your work, it tells the story. You said you do it and then you did it. Now I'm not second God. I ain't gonna lie. And I'm definitely not pretending that I've mastered this. I'm still finding the leaks. And there's gonna be leaks to you high, bro. It's to me 99. I ain't gonna lie. I'm still catching places where I'm making commitments too casual. I gotta lock in the commitments because if I say something, I want to be that nigga that actually does it, you dig? And I'm still noticing where my actions don't match what I said I wanted, and that's actually why I'm documenting this. And y'all have seen it, I'm curious how much of a man's life can actually change, if you stop obsessing over the massive outcomes and really start improving the execution, those daily habits. Because I've already seen what it does to the body. Now I just want to see what it does to everything else. And it's also a huge reason why I'm building OutHere Elite the way that I am. I don't want it to become another place where you consume outcome information. You feel motivated for 45 minutes and then go right back to the same behavior. There's already enough information out there. The problem is really just execution. The problem is your accountability. Accountability is the best ability. The problem is really just having a standard that you live by and having people around you who notice whether you're living up to that standard. So I ain't gonna lie. If this video feels uncomfortably familiar, if there's a gap between the man you kept saying you want to become and what your days actually look like, that's the exact gap we're feeling and we're working on inside OutHere Elite. We're building that accountability, that execution, the physical transformation, the environment, becoming the kind of man whose actions finally match your ambition. You're actually becoming him, bro. And that's the season you're in. If you're in that season, come join us inside OutHere Elite. It's elite. I ain't gonna lie. Not because another community is going to magically change your life. It's not. But because sometimes the fastest way for you to stop capping to yourself, big boy, is put yourself in a room where your actions are visible. Accountability is the best ability. I'm going to keep tracking this in my own life too, because I just want to know what happens if I spend the next year measuring fewer outcomes and actually paying closer attention to that one thing. Did I do what I would say I was going to do? You know what I mean? And I've done it for a year already. I see what it did to my body. I already know what happened when I, applied that same standard to losing over $100. Now I just want to see what happens when I find it applies to everything else. And y'all, let's see it too. It's what